The empty chair sat at the corner of the long table like a wound no one wanted to touch. Asha Korran noticed it as soon as she entered the barn, drawn by the warm glow of lanterns and the sound of laughter that spilled into the evening air. She had been traveling for 3 days through unfamiliar territory, her provisions nearly gone, her boots worn thin at the heels. The custom among her people was clear. A table set with an empty chair was an invitation to weary travelers, a sign that strangers were welcome to share food and warmth. She had seen such tables at crossroads shrines and village gathering halls throughout Orc lands. This must be the same tradition, she thought, her stomach clenching with hunger. The barn had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Long tables stretched the length of the space, crowded with humans in their finest clothes. Asha hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her dusty traveling cloak and mud-stained trousers. But the chair was empty, and the food on the table looked abundant. Surely they would not mind one more mouth to feed if they had set a place for travelers. She moved quietly along the edge of the gathering, keeping her head down. No one seemed to notice her approach. The humans were too busy celebrating, raising cups and calling out toasts. A young couple sat at the head table, the woman in white lace that caught the lamplight, the man beside her grinning like he had swallowed the sun. A wedding, then. Asha felt a pang of longing. She had been to Orc weddings where the whole clan gathered, where even strangers were pulled into the circle and fed until they could barely move. She slipped into the empty chair and reached for a roll from the basket in front of her. The bread was still warm. She tore into it with more desperation than grace, then spooned stew onto the empty plate. The first bite was heaven. Rich beef and root vegetables, seasoned with herbs she could not name. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of pure gratitude. "What in the hell do you think you are doing?" The voice was sharp, female, outraged. Asha opened her eyes to find a woman in a green dress staring at her with undisguised horror. The conversations around them began to die. Heads turned. Asha felt the weight of dozens of eyes settling on her shoulders. "I apologize," Asha said carefully, setting down her spoon. "I saw the empty chair and thought it was the traveler's welcome. I did not mean to intrude. The traveler's welcome." The woman's voice rose higher. "This is a private celebration. That chair is not for you." Heat flooded Asha's face. She stood quickly, nearly knocking over her water cup in her haste. "I am sorry, I misunderstood. I will leave at once." "Damn right you will," a man called from further down the table. "Going to let an orc sit with us now, are we? What is next? Inviting them to sleep in our beds?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Asha kept her head down and turned toward the door, her mortification complete. Stupid, she thought. Stupid to think human customs would match her own. Stupid to let hunger cloud her judgment. "Wait." The voice was quiet but carried authority. Asha paused. A man rose from the bench across from where she had been sitting. He was tall but not unusually so, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. He wore a simple but well-cut jacket, and there was sawdust caught in the cuffs of his sleeves. "The food is plentiful," he said, addressing the room rather than Asha. "One more guest will not diminish the feast." "Marcus, you cannot be serious," the woman in green protested. "That is Catherine's chair." "Catherine is dead," Marcus said flatly. The words fell like stones into still water. "She has been dead for 5 years. The chair is empty. Let the woman eat." The silence that followed was suffocating. Asha wanted to melt into the floorboards. She had not just taken any chair. She had taken a memorial seat, a place held in honor of the dead. The violation felt immense. "I truly did not know," she said quietly, meeting the man's eyes. They were brown and steady with a sadness that lived deep in them like an old wound. "I would not have dishonored your dead for anything. Please believe me." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Sit down and finish your meal. You look like you have come a long way." "Marcus," the woman in green tried again, but he silenced her with a look. "It is done, Eleanor. Let it be." Slowly, unwillingly, the conversations around them resumed. Asha remained standing, torn between hunger and humiliation. Marcus sat back down and picked up his fork as if nothing unusual had happened. "Well," he said without looking at her. "Are you going to eat or not?" Asha sat. She picked up her spoon with trembling hands and forced herself to take another bite of stew. It tasted like ash now, but she swallowed it anyway. She owed him that much. The man named Marcus had stood up for her when he had no reason to, had invited scorn onto himself to spare her further shame. The least she could do was not waste the food. They ate in silence while the celebration swirled around them. Someone struck up a fiddle tune and couples began to dance. The bride and groom moved to the center of the floor, and everyone cheered. Asha kept her eyes on her plate and tried to make herself as small as possible. "Where are you headed?" Marcus asked after a while. "North," Asha said. "To the logging camps near Pinehaven. I heard they are hiring." "They are." He took a drink from his cup. "The work is hard." "I am not afraid of hard work." "I did not say you were." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You have the hands of someone who works." Asha looked down at her scarred, calloused palms. "I was a stonemason's apprentice. Before." "Before what?" "Before my master died and his family sold the business. They did not want to keep on an orc worker." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She did not usually speak so openly about such things. Marcus nodded slowly. "Pinehaven is still 2 days' walk from here." "You have a place to stay tonight. I will sleep under the stars. It is no hardship." "Cold, though. There is frost in the air." He stood and brushed crumbs from his lap. "I have a workshop with a stove. You can bed down there if you want. It is warm and dry." Asha stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because it is cold outside and you need a place to sleep." He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "The workshop is attached to my house, but it has its own entrance. You will have privacy." "I do not understand you," Asha said slowly. "You do not know me. I sat in your dead wife's chair. Why show me any kindness?" Something shifted in Marcus's expression. For a moment, the sadness in his eyes rose to the surface like a drowned thing floating up from deep water. "Maybe because Catherine would have done the same," he said quietly. "She always said that grief was no excuse for forgetting how to be human." Asha's throat tightened. She looked away, blinking hard. "I would be grateful for the shelter," she managed. "Good." Marcus picked up his coat from the back of his chair. "Let me say goodbye to Thomas and Mary. Then we can go." He walked over to the head table where the bride and groom were holding court. Asha watched him embrace the groom, saw the younger man's face light up with affection. Marcus was clearly important to these people, clearly loved. That made his defense of her all the more remarkable. He had spent his goodwill on a stranger. When Marcus returned, they left together through the side door of the barn. The night air was indeed cold, sharp with the promise of autumn frost. Asha pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders and followed Marcus down a dirt road that wound between darkened houses. The village was small, perhaps 20 buildings clustered around a central square. Beyond it, she could see the dark silhouettes of trees against the starry sky. Marcus's house stood at the edge of the settlement. It was a neat, 2-story structure with a workshop built onto the side. The sharp smell of cut wood and pine resin hung in the air. Marcus led her to the workshop door and lit a lantern inside. The space was orderly and clean, filled with workbenches and tools hung on pegs. A stove sat in the corner, cold but ready. "I will get the fire started," Marcus said, kneeling by the stove. "There are blankets in that chest over there. Help yourself." Asha found the blankets, thick wool that smelled of cedar. She folded one into a makeshift pillow and spread the others on the floor near the stove. Marcus worked in silence, coaxing flames from kindling, feeding in larger pieces of wood. The warmth spread quickly through the small space. "Thank you," Asha said when he stood. "Truly, I will be gone before dawn." "No need to rush off," Marcus said. "The sun will not be up until late. Rest as long as you need." He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. "Catherine's chair," he said quietly, not looking at her. "It is a tradition in these parts. When someone dies, you leave their chair empty at celebrations for a year. After that, you are supposed to let someone else sit in it, a sign that life goes on." 5 years is longer than a year," Asha said gently. "Yes." Marcus's shoulders tensed. "Yes, it is." He left before she could say anything else. Asha heard his footsteps cross the yard, heard the distant sound of his door opening and closing. She lay down on her makeshift bed and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows dance in the firelight. She had expected hostility in human lands. She had received it often enough, but she had not expected this strange, complicated kindness from a man who carried his grief like a stone in his chest. She thought about the empty chair and the way Marcus had spoken his wife's name, Catherine. A woman who had believed that grief was no excuse for forgetting one's humanity. Asha wondered what kind of person Catherine had been to inspire such enduring love. Sleep came slowly. When it finally took her, she dreamed of empty chairs and warm fires and a man with sad brown eyes. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Gray dawn light seeped through the workshop's high windows. Asha sat up, confused, and found Marcus standing by the workbench with a plate and a steaming mug. "Thought you might be hungry," he said. "It is not much. Eggs and bacon." Asha's stomach growled in response. She accepted the plate with both hands. "You did not have to do this. I was cooking anyway." Marcus leaned against the workbench and sipped his own coffee. "Sleep well, better than I have in weeks." Asha took a bite of egg. It was perfectly cooked, the yolk still soft. "You are a good cook," Catherine taught me. "Before the fire, I could barely boil water without burning it." He said it casually, but Asha heard the weight behind the words. "The fire?" she asked carefully. Marcus's expression closed off. "It was a long time ago." Asha nodded and did not press. They ate in silence for a while, comfortable and strange all at once. Outside, birds began to sing. The village was waking up. "The sawmill where I work is always looking for hands," Marcus said eventually. "If you want work closer than Pine Haven, I could put in a word for you. The foreman is a friend." "You are the foreman," Asha said. It was not a question. She had seen the way he carried himself, the quiet authority. Marcus's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. "True enough. So, do you want the job?" "I know nothing about lumber." "You know about working stone. Lumber is easier, lighter anyway." Asha considered. 2 more days of walking, or a job here in this strange little village where a sad-eyed man had shown her unexpected mercy. "Will the other workers accept an orc?" "Some will, some will not. I will make it clear that anyone who causes trouble will answer to me." Marcus met her eyes. "I will not lie to you. It will not be easy, but the work is honest and the pay is fair." "Then I accept," Asha said. "Thank you." "You keep thanking me. I am just offering a job. You are offering more than that, and we both know it." Marcus looked away. "Finish your breakfast. I will show you where the crew sleeps. There is a bunkhouse with a spare room." The sawmill sprawled along the bank of a quick-running creek. The water powered the great blade that cut logs into planks. Marcus showed Asha around, pointing out the log pond where timber waited to be processed, the sorting yard, the kilns for drying lumber. The crew was already at work, rough men in flannel and denim who called out greetings to Marcus and fell silent when they saw Asha. "This is Asha Korran," Marcus announced. "She is joining the crew. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." The men exchanged glances. One of them, a big fellow with a red beard, spat into the sawdust. "Can she lift her share?" "She was a stonemason's apprentice," Marcus said. "I expect she can lift more than you." That drew a few laughs. Redbeard grunted but did not argue. Marcus assigned Asha to work with a quiet older man named Harold, feeding logs onto the saw carriage. It was brutal work. The logs were heavy and awkward, the pace relentless. But Harold was patient and showed her the tricks of the trade, and by midday, Asha had found her rhythm. She saw Marcus throughout the day, always moving, always working. He hauled lumber, checked measurements, adjusted the saw blade when it ran off true. He worked harder than anyone, and the men respected him for it. More than once, Asha caught him watching her, though he always looked away when she met his gaze. At the end of the shift, her muscles screamed and her hands were raw despite the gloves Harold had lent her. Marcus found her washing up at the pump outside the mill. "How was the first day?" he asked. "Hard, good." Asha splashed cold water on her face. "Your crew is skilled, they are. Harold says you did well. Harold is generous." "Harold does not lie." Marcus hesitated. "There is a meal hall where the crew eats. You are welcome to join us, or if you prefer, you can take your meals alone." "Some do." Asha thought about sitting in a room full of men who did not quite trust her, feeling their eyes, hearing their whispers. Then she thought about eating alone, letting fear dictate her choices. "I will join you," she said. The meal hall was a long, low building with rough-hewn tables. The food was simple but abundant: stew, bread, roasted vegetables. Asha sat at the end of one table and Harold sat down across from her without comment. A few other men joined them, curious more than hostile. They asked her about stonework, about where she had trained. She answered honestly, and gradually, the conversation expanded to include stories about collapsed walls and crooked foundations and architects who thought they knew better than the craftsmen. Marcus sat at the far end of the room with red beard and two other men. Asha noticed that he ate quickly and left early, carrying a mug of coffee with him. He seemed restless, like a man who did not want to sit still for too long. The days developed a pattern. Asha woke before dawn, worked until her body ached, ate with the crew, and fell into bed exhausted. The bunkhouse room was small but private, with a narrow cot and a stove she could light when the nights grew cold. The work was hard, but she had always thrived on physical labor. It quieted her mind, gave her hands something to do. Marcus treated her the same as any other worker, fairly, firmly, with no special favors. But sometimes she caught him watching her with that same sad, searching expression he had worn at the wedding feast. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her: a stranger, a reminder of his dead wife's compassion, or something else entirely. 2 weeks after she started at the mill, a wagon arrived from the village. Asha was hauling planks to the sorting yard when she saw Marcus talking to the driver. The woman in the green dress from the wedding, Alina, climbed down and approached Marcus with purposeful strides. Even from a distance, Asha could tell the conversation was tense. "You cannot be serious," Alina's voice carried across the yard. "You gave her a job. She needed work." "I had an opening." Marcus's tone was level. "After what she did, after she sat in Catherine's chair, it was a misunderstanding. Let it go." "I will not let it go." Alina stepped closer to Marcus, her voice dropping but still audible. "Catherine was my sister, Marcus, my sister. Do you think she would want you replacing her with some orc girl?" Asha felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Catherine's sister. No wonder Alina had been so angry at the feast, and now Marcus was being attacked for showing Asha basic human decency. "I am not replacing anyone," Marcus said, his voice hard. "Asha is a mill worker, nothing more. Is that why you watch her all the time? Is that why you gave her private lodging instead of putting her in the bunkhouse with the men?" "I gave her the spare room because she is a woman and the bunkhouse is full of rough men. Do not read more into it than that." Alina's laugh was bitter. "You were always a terrible liar, Marcus. Catherine knew it. I know it." She climbed back onto her wagon and left without another word. Marcus stood in the yard for a long moment, his shoulders rigid, before he turned and walked into the mill office. He did not come out for the rest of the day. That evening, Asha found Marcus working late in the workshop attached to his house. The door was open, spilling light into the gathering dusk. She hesitated, then knocked on the frame. "What do you need?" Marcus asked without looking up from the chair he was sanding. "To apologize," Asha said. Now he looked up. "For what?" "For causing trouble between you and your family." "Catherine's sister has every right to be angry. I understand if you need me to leave." Marcus set down the sandpaper and dusted off his hands. "Alina is protective. She always has been, but she does not get to decide who I hire at the mill. Still, I do not want to be the cause of pain for you." Asha stepped into the workshop, drawn by the warm light and the smell of wood shavings. "You have been kind to me. I would not repay that by making your life harder. You are not making anything harder." Marcus picked up the chair and examined it critically. "People have opinions. They always do. I stopped letting opinions dictate my life a long time ago." "Did you?" Asha asked quietly. "Or did you stop living your life because of someone else's death?" The words hung in the air between them. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You do not know what you are talking about." "I know grief when I see it," Asha said. "I lost my mother 2 years ago. Sickness took her slowly. I watched her fade until there was nothing left. For months after, I could not look at stone without thinking of the monument I should have carved for her. I stopped working, stopped eating. I wanted to die with her." "What changed?" Marcus asked, his voice rough. "My master. He told me that honoring the dead meant living well, not dying slowly. He said my mother would be ashamed to see me waste the life she had given me." Asha moved closer, studying the chair in Marcus's hands. "It was beautiful work, the joints seamless, the wood glowing with oil." "Is that what you are making? A chair to replace the empty one?" "No." Marcus set the chair down carefully. "This is for Thomas and Mary, a wedding gift. You are a good friend. I try to be." They stood in silence for a moment. The workshop was warm from the stove, intimate in the lamplight. Asha could see the lines of exhaustion around Marcus's eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was not an old man, but life had aged him. "How did she die?" Asha asked. "Your wife." Marcus's hand stilled on the chair back. "There was a fire in the house. She was asleep upstairs. I was working late in this workshop." His voice went flat, emotionless. "I heard her screaming. By the time I got inside, the stairs were engulfed. I tried to reach her. I tried." Asha saw the scars then, pale marks on his forearms where his sleeves had ridden up. Burned scars. "The roof collapsed," Marcus continued. "They pulled me out. I woke up 3 days later. Catherine was already buried." "You blame yourself," Asha said. "I was 50 feet away and I could not save her. Who else should I blame? The fire, fate, God." Asha reached out and touched his hand lightly. "Anyone but yourself." Marcus looked down at her fingers on his wrist. For a moment she thought he might pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over and clasped hers. His palm was warm, calloused from years of labor. "I think about her every day," he said quietly. "I talk to her sometimes when I am alone. I know she cannot hear me, but I tell her about the mill, about the village, about stupid things like the weather. I am not ready to stop." No one is asking you to stop, Asha said. Remembering someone is not the same as refusing to live. Is that not what I have been doing, refusing to live? I think you have been waiting, Asha said. For permission, maybe, or for the pain to fade enough that you can breathe again. Marcus's fingers tightened around hers. And if it never fades, then you learn to carry it. You learn to live with a weight in your chest and a hollow place in your heart, but you keep living. Asha met his eyes. Because the alternative is betraying everything the person you loved wanted for you. When did you become so wise? Marcus asked. There was no sarcasm in it, only genuine curiosity. I am not wise, I am just someone who has been where you are. Asha gently pulled her hand back. Thank you for defending me to a leaner. I know it cost you. It cost nothing, Marcus said, but his eyes said otherwise. Asha left him in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and lamplight and half-finished furniture. She walked back to the bunkhouse under a sky thick with stars and wondered what she was doing. She had come here by accident, stayed for a job, and now she was getting tangled up in the complicated grief of a human man she barely knew. But she could not stop thinking about his hands, scarred from trying to save his wife. Could not stop hearing the emptiness in his voice when he spoke about her death. Marcus Lahey was a good man caught in a trap of his own making, and Asha wanted to help him find his way out. Autumn deepened into true cold. The leaves turned gold and crimson, then fell in drifts that crunched underfoot. At the mill, the work continued unabated. Lumber was needed before the winter snows made the roads impassable. The crew worked long hours, racing against the weather. Asha grew stronger, more skilled. She learned to read the grain of wood, to spot weaknesses before they became breaks. Harold taught her how to sharpen the saw blades, how to judge the moisture content of timber by feel. The other men accepted her presence, if not with warmth then at least without hostility. Even Red Beard, whose name turned out to be Garrett, gave her a grudging nod of respect after she helped him shift a jammed log that had pinned his leg. Marcus remained a constant, steady presence. He was not a man who spoke unnecessarily, but his actions were eloquent. He noticed when Asha's gloves wore through and left a new pair on her workbench. When she caught a cold from working in the rain, he sent Harold to the bunkhouse with a jar of honey and a tin of his wife's favorite tea blend. Marcus says to drink this, Harold had said, setting the items on her table. Says Catherine swore by it. The gesture had moved Asha more than she wanted to admit. Marcus was sharing a piece of his lost wife, offering comfort through her memory. It felt sacred. They fell into an easy pattern of conversation. Most evenings, Asha would find Marcus in his workshop, and they would talk while he worked. He told her about the village, about the people who lived there. She told him about her childhood in the orc settlements, about learning to shape stone under the hot sun, about the songs her mother used to sing. Do orcs always sing while they work? Marcus asked one evening. He was planing a board, long curls of wood falling away with each stroke. Not always. But my mother said singing made the work lighter. She believed stones had spirits and you had to sing to them so they would shape themselves for you. Did it work? I do not know, but I always felt better when I sang. Asha smiled at the memory. Even when my master told me I sounded like a crow with a sore throat. Marcus laughed. It was the first time Asha had heard him truly laugh, and the sound transformed his face. The sadness lifted, just for a moment, and she glimpsed the man he must have been before the fire. I would like to hear you sing sometime, he said. You would regret it, Asha warned. My master was not wrong, I doubt that. The moment stretched between them, warm and fragile. Then Marcus bent back to his work and the spell broke. One cold afternoon in late October, a problem arose at the mill. The main saw blade cracked during operation, sending splinters of metal flying. No one was hurt, but the mill ground to a halt. The nearest replacement blade was in Rivertown, a full day's ride south. "I will go," Marcus said, already pulling on his coat. "If I leave now, I can be back by tomorrow evening." "Take someone with you," Garrett suggested. "Roads are not safe this time of year. Bandits like to make their last raids before winter." Marcus hesitated, then looked at Asha. "Can you ride?" "Well enough," Asha said. "Good. Saddle a horse. We leave in 10 minutes." They rode south under a gray sky that promised snow. Marcus set a brisk pace and Asha kept up without complaint. The countryside rolled past, fields gone brown with frost, forests bare and skeletal. They passed scattered farmsteads where smoke rose from chimneys and dogs barked at their passage. "Have you been to Rivertown before?" Marcus asked. "No. Is it large, bigger than our village? Maybe 300 people. They have a proper market square and a blacksmith who can craft anything." "Including saw blades." "Including saw blades." Marcus glanced at her. "You will draw attention. Rivertown sees fewer orcs than we do. Stay close to me." Asha nodded. She was used to hostile stares, to whispers that followed her down streets, but having Marcus beside her made it easier somehow. They reached Rivertown as the sun was setting. The town was indeed larger, with buildings of brick and stone lining cobbled streets. Marcus led them directly to the blacksmith's forge, a cavernous space where the heat hit like a wall. The blacksmith was a woman, tall and muscular with arms like iron bars. She greeted Marcus with a grin. "Marcus Lahey, I heard you were running the mill these days. What brings you to my door?" "Broken saw blade. I need a replacement. Let me check the stock." The blacksmith disappeared into the back of the forge, then returned shaking her head. "I've got one that will fit, but it needs sharpening. Will take me a few hours. Come back in the morning." Marcus frowned. "We need to get back." "Then you should have sent word ahead." "I cannot rush good work, Marcus. You know that. Fine. Tomorrow morning." Marcus turned to Asha. "There is an inn up the street. We can get rooms for the night." The inn was warm and crowded with travelers seeking refuge from the cold. Marcus secured 2 rooms side by side on the second floor. They ate dinner in the common room, thick stew and dark bread, while a musician played a fiddle in the corner. "This reminds me of the wedding feast," Asha said quietly. "Except I know better than to take an empty chair now." Marcus's expression grew somber. "I never apologized for that. For putting you in that position. You did not put me anywhere. I sat down of my own accord. I should have explained about Catherine's chair, about why people were so angry." "Why was it still empty after 5 years?" Asha asked. "You said the tradition is only for 1 year." Marcus stared into his cup. "Because I was not ready. Because letting someone else sit in that chair meant admitting she was truly gone. As long as it stayed empty, I could pretend she might still walk through the door. And now I think I have been cruel to her memory." Catherine believed in living fully, in embracing joy even when the world was hard. She would have hated what I have done, turning her chair into a shrine. "Then let someone sit in it," Asha said gently. "Fill the empty space." Marcus looked at her with those sad brown eyes. "I think someone already has." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Asha's breath caught. She had felt this growing between them, this connection that went beyond kindness or friendship. But hearing Marcus acknowledge it made it real in a way that terrified her. "Marcus," she began, but he held up a hand. "I know, it is too soon, too complicated. You are orc and I am human and people will have opinions." He leaned forward. "But I cannot stop thinking about you, about your strength, your honesty, the way you look at the world. I have been dead for 5 years, Asha, and you make me feel alive again." "I do not want to be a replacement," Asha said. I do not want to be the person who fills Catherine's empty space just because you are lonely. You are not a replacement. You are something entirely new. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I loved Catherine, I will always love her, but she is gone and you are here and I think I am falling in love with you. Asha felt tears prick her eyes. This is too fast, we barely know each other. I know it is fast. But I have lived through losing everything, and it taught me not to waste time on fear. Marcus's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Tell me you do not feel this too and I will let it go. I will be your employer and nothing more. Asha wanted to lie. Wanted to protect herself from the inevitable pain of caring too much for someone who could never truly be hers. But she had never been good at lying. I feel it, she whispered. God help me, I feel it. Marcus smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. Then we will figure it out. Together. They sat in the crowded inn, hands clasped across the table, while the fiddle played and the fire crackled and the world outside grew dark and cold. Asha felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the wine or the hearth. For the first time since her mother died, she felt like she belonged somewhere. That night, lying in her narrow inn bed, Asha stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what had happened. Marcus had declared his feelings openly, honestly, without shame. He was willing to pursue this connection despite the complications, despite the inevitable judgment they would face. Could she do the same? Could she risk her heart on a man who still spoke to his dead wife in the evenings, who carried grief like a second skin? But Marcus was not asking her to erase his past. He was asking her to be part of his future. That felt like a gift beyond measure. Sleep came slowly. When it did, she dreamed of empty chairs and clasped hands and a man whose eyes held both sorrow and hope. They retrieved the saw blade at dawn and rode back to the village through a light snowfall. The world was hushed and white, beautiful in its silence. Marcus rode close beside her, and several times their legs brushed together. Each touch felt deliberate, significant. What will you tell the crew? Asha asked as they neared the mill. Nothing yet, Marcus said. This is ours for now. When we are ready, we will tell people, together. Asha nodded. She was grateful for his discretion. The crew had just begun to accept her. Adding a romance with the foreman to the mix would complicate everything. But secrets had a way of revealing themselves. Over the following weeks, Asha and Marcus tried to maintain their professional distance during work hours. But in the evenings, they gravitated toward each other like magnets. They talked for hours in Marcus's workshop, sharing stories, learning each other's histories. Marcus told her about growing up in the village, about learning the lumber trade from his father, about meeting Catherine at a harvest dance when they were both 17. She was wearing a yellow dress, he said, his voice soft with memory. She was laughing at something her friend said, and I thought I had never heard a better sound. I asked her to dance, and she said yes, and I knew right then that I would marry her. Were you happy? Asha asked. Very. For 10 years we were very happy. Marcus's hand stilled on the piece of wood he was carving. We wanted children. Catherine miscarried twice. The second time nearly killed her. After that, we decided not to try again. She said we would be enough for each other. And were you? Yes. Until I lost her. Asha moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. She rested her hand on his shoulder, offering silent comfort. Marcus covered her hand with his own. Thank you, he said quietly, for listening, for not telling me to move on or forget. I would never tell you to forget. Memory is how we honor the dead. Marcus turned to face her. In the lamplight, his eyes were dark and searching. Asha, I need to know something. If this goes where I think it is going, will you be able to live with Catherine's ghost? Because she will always be part of me. I do not want you to erase her, Asha said. I just want a place beside her in your heart. You have more than that already. Marcus reached up and touched her face, his fingers gentle on her cheek. "You have brought me back to life." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. Asha did not pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and tentative and full of unspoken promises. Asha felt her heart stumble in her chest, felt warmth flooding through her veins. When they finally broke apart, Marcus was smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I know," Asha said. "I could tell. Was I that obvious? Only to someone who was watching. And were you watching? Every moment." They kissed again, longer this time, with more confidence. Asha wound her arms around Marcus's neck and let herself sink into the sensation. His hands settled on her waist, steady and sure. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should slow down," Marcus said, though he made no move to step away. "We should," Asha agreed. She did not step away either. They stood in the workshop, wrapped in each other's arms, while the stove ticked and the wind rattled the windows. Asha felt safer than she had in years, held by this complicated, grieving, wonderful man who had looked past her green skin and tusks to see the person beneath. "Stay," Marcus said suddenly. "Not here in the workshop, in my house, with me." Asha pulled back to look at him. "Marcus, that is a big step, I know. But I am tired of pretending, tired of hiding what I feel. I want you in my life, Asha, fully and completely. People will talk. Let them talk. I have spent 5 years caring too much about what people think, about whether I am being faithful to Catherine's memory, about whether I deserve to be happy again." Marcus cupped her face in both hands. "Catherine would have liked you. She would have wanted this for me." "You sound very certain." "I am, because I knew her better than anyone, and I know she loved me enough to want me to find joy again." Asha searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found only sincerity and a deep, aching hope. "Then yes," she said, "I will stay." Moving into Marcus's house was a strange, momentous thing. Asha brought her few possessions from the bunkhouse and claimed the small spare room on the first floor. She knew the village would notice, would whisper and speculate. But Marcus had been right. She was tired of hiding. The crew noticed immediately. Garrett cornered her during the lunch break, his expression unreadable. "So you and Marcus," he said without preamble. "Yes," Asha said. "Is that a problem for me?" "No, you both work hard, and what you do outside the mill is your business." He paused. "But not everyone will see it that way. Marcus is well liked, but taking up with an orc will cost him friends. I know." "Just make sure you are worth it," Garrett said gruffly. "He deserves to be happy. Catherine's death near broke him. Do not break him again." "I will not," Asha promised. "I care about him too much for that." Garrett nodded and walked away. Later, Harold approached her with a shy smile. "Glad to see Marcus smiling again," he said simply. "He is a good man. You are good for him." The support meant more than Asha could express. It was not universal. Some of the crew kept their distance, uncomfortable with the relationship. But no one challenged Marcus directly, and for that, Asha was grateful. Elena was another matter. She arrived at the house 3 days after Asha moved in, her face tight with anger. "You have lost your mind," she told Marcus without preamble. "Taking an orc into your home, into Catherine's home. Have you no shame?" "Careful," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are speaking about the woman I love." Elena recoiled as if he had slapped her. "You love her." "Marcus, she is an orc. She is not even human." "She is more human than most people I know," Marcus said. "She is kind and honest and strong. She makes me happy, Elena. For the first time in 5 years I am happy. Can you not just be glad for me?" "I will not stand by and watch you dishonor my sister's memory," Elena said. "Then do not stand by. But do not ask me to live in a tomb to please you." Marcus's jaw was set, his eyes hard. "Catherine is dead. I will always love her, but I am still alive and I am allowed to build a new life. With an orc, Eleanor's voice broke. Marcus, please, think about what you are doing. I have thought about nothing else. This is my choice, Eleanor. Respect it or do not, but do not ask me to choose between you and Asha. I will choose Asha. The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Eleanor stared at Marcus for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned and fled. Asha, who had been listening from the other room, came out to find Marcus standing rigid by the window. I am sorry, she said quietly. I do not want to come between you and your family. You are not coming between anything. Eleanor is choosing this fight, not us. Marcus turned to face her, and the anger drained from his expression. I meant what I said. I choose you, Asha. Over and over I choose you. Asha crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. Marcus held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other. The winter came in hard and fast. Snow piled high and the mill operated on reduced hours. The cold was brutal, but Marcus's house was warm and welcoming. Asha learned the rhythms of domestic life beside him. They cooked together, shared chores, talked late into the night by the fire. It felt like building something real and lasting, but the tension with Eleanor weighed on Marcus. Asha could see it in the way his shoulders tightened when anyone mentioned her name, in the distant look that sometimes crossed his face. Catherine's sister was rejecting him, and that rejection carried the sting of betrayal. Talk to her, Asha urged one evening. Do not let this wound fester. What is there to say? She made her position clear. Then make yours clear in return. Tell her what you told me about honoring Catherine while still choosing to live. Asha took his hand. Eleanor is grieving too. She lost her sister. Maybe she fears that if you move on, Catherine will be forgotten. Marcus considered this. You think I should reassure her? I think you should remind her that love is not a finite resource. You can love Catherine's memory and love me at the same time. They do not cancel each other out. When did you get so wise about families? Marcus asked with a small smile. I am improvising, Asha admitted. But I know that if my mother could speak from beyond death, she would tell me to be happy, to love fully. Catherine would tell you the same. Marcus pulled her close and kissed her forehead. I will talk to Eleanor tomorrow. The conversation with Eleanor happened at the small house where Catherine's sister lived with her husband and 2 children. Marcus went alone, and Asha spent the afternoon pacing the house, imagining every possible outcome. When Marcus finally returned, he looked exhausted but lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted. How did it go? Asha asked. Better than I expected. I told her everything. About the guilt I have carried, about feeling like I betrayed Catherine by surviving, about how you have helped me find my way back to living. Marcus sat heavily in his chair. Eleanor cried. She said she has been angry at me for years because I stopped caring about anything, including her and the children. She thought I had forgotten Catherine. And now she understands that remembering and living are not mutually exclusive. Marcus reached for Asha's hand. She wants to meet you properly, not at a wedding feast or in anger, but as a person. I would like that, Asha said carefully. If she is ready, she is trying to be ready. That is more than I expected. The meeting took place a week later over tea in Eleanor's warm kitchen. The children, a boy and a girl aged 6 and 8, stared at Asha with undisguised curiosity. You really are green, the girl said. Lily, Eleanor scolded, but Asha laughed. I really am, Asha agreed. And you really have the biggest eyes I have ever seen. Lily giggled. The ice was broken. Over tea and small cakes, Eleanor asked Asha about her work, her life, her intentions toward Marcus. Asha answered honestly, holding nothing back. She could see Eleanor evaluating her, measuring her against some internal standard. Finally, Catherine's sister nodded. "Marcus says you make him happy," Elinor said. "That is what matters most, but you need to understand something. Catherine was my sister and I loved her. I will not forget her." "I would never ask you to," Asha said. "I want to honor her memory, not erase it." "Then we will find a way forward," Elinor said. She reached across the table and squeezed Asha's hand briefly. "Thank you for bringing him back to us." The reconciliation eased something in Marcus. He smiled more often, laughed more freely. The sadness that had lived in his eyes for so long began to fade, replaced by a quiet contentment. Asha felt it too, this sense of building a life together brick by brick. But there was still one shadow that Marcus had not fully addressed, his guilt over Catherine's death. It surfaced in small ways. He would grow tense when smoke curled from a chimney. He would startle awake from nightmares, drenched in sweat, gasping Catherine's name. Asha held him through those moments, offering what comfort she could. But she knew the deepest wound remained unhealed. One night in late January, the anniversary of Catherine's death, Marcus disappeared after dinner. Asha found him in the workshop, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall and a bottle of whiskey beside him. "Talk to me," she said, settling down beside him. "I could not save her," Marcus said. His voice was raw. "I was right there and I could not save her. You tried." "I did not try hard enough. I should have broken through those flames. I should have carried her out or died trying." "Then I would have lost you before I ever met you," Asha said quietly, "and the world would be poorer for it." Marcus turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "How can you say that? You did not know me then. But I know you now. I know your kindness, your strength, your capacity for love." "Those things do not exist in a vacuum, Marcus. They were shaped by everything you experienced, including losing Catherine." Asha took his hand. "You survived because you were meant to survive, not because you failed, but because your story was not finished. What if I do not deserve to survive? What if I deserve to carry this guilt forever?" "No one deserves to suffer forever," Asha said. "Not even you." Marcus closed his eyes. Tears leaked from beneath his lids. "I miss her. I miss her so much." "I know, and you are allowed to miss her. You are allowed to grieve." Asha squeezed his hand. "But you are also allowed to forgive yourself, to accept that you did everything you could and it still was not enough, and that is not your fault." "Catherine used to say that," Marcus whispered. "When something went wrong at the mill or in the village, when I blamed myself for things beyond my control, she would tell me I was not responsible for the whole world. She was right. She usually was." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at Asha. Really looked at her with a focus that felt like being seen down to the soul. "I think she would have loved you, your honesty, your refusal to let me wallow in my own pain." "I hope so," Asha said, "because I love you, Marcus, and I need you to love yourself enough to let go of the guilt." "I am trying," Marcus said. "Every day I am trying." "Then that is enough." They sat together in the workshop until the whiskey was gone and the tears had dried. Then Asha helped Marcus to his feet and led him back to the house, to the warm bed they now shared. She held him while he slept, and when he woke from nightmares, she whispered words of comfort until he fell back into peaceful rest. The healing was slow, gradual, but it was real. Spring came late that year. Snow lingered into March, and the creek ran high with meltwater. The mill roared back to life as orders poured in. Asha worked alongside the crew, her muscles honed by months of labor, her skills sharp. She had become indispensable, and the men knew it. Even Garrett admitted grudgingly that she was the best log handler they had ever had. Marcus glowed with pride every time someone praised Asha's work. He had stopped trying to hide their relationship. They walked through the village together, ate at the meal hall side by side, attended church services as a couple. Some people stared, some whispered. But more and more, the village simply accepted them. One warm afternoon in April, Marcus found Asha in the sorting yard and asked her to take a walk with him. They followed the creek upstream, away from the mill and the noise, until they reached a quiet glade where wildflowers were just beginning to bloom. "I used to come here with Catherine," Marcus said, standing at the water's edge. "It was her favorite spot." Asha tensed, unsure what to say. But Marcus turned to her with a smile. "I wanted to share it with you, because it is beautiful and because I am not afraid anymore." "Afraid of what?" Asha asked. "Of betraying her memory, of moving forward, of being happy." Marcus took Asha's hands in his. "I have been holding on to grief like it was all I had left of her. But you taught me that love is not measured by how much pain you carry. It is measured by how much joy you can create." "Marcus," Asha breathed, "I am not asking you to replace Catherine. I am asking you to be my future." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple wooden ring, carved from pale oak and polished to a soft glow. "I made this myself. It is not much, but it is honest work from honest hands. Asha Korran, will you marry me?" Asha felt tears streaming down her face. "Are you sure? Truly sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Marcus said. "I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to fill every empty chair with laughter and warmth and the future we will create together." "Yes," Asha said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." Marcus slipped the wooden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her while the creek sang beside them and the spring sun warmed their shoulders. Asha felt like her heart might burst from sheer happiness. They told Alina first. She cried, but they were good tears, tears of joy and release. She embraced Asha and welcomed her into the family. The village received the news with mixed reactions, but Marcus and Asha had expected that. They did not need everyone's approval. They only needed each other. The wedding was planned for the harvest season, when the work slowed and the weather was mild. It would be a simple ceremony, held in the village square, with a feast afterward. Asha felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as the date approached. She had never imagined herself as a bride, had never dared to dream of a future with someone who loved her so completely. Summer passed in a haze of work and planning. Alina helped Asha sew a wedding dress from cream-colored linen, simple but beautiful. Marcus built a new chair for their home, a companion to the one he had kept in memory of Catherine. "Two chairs," he explained, "for two lives joined together." The night before the wedding, Asha stood in Marcus's workshop and looked at the pair of chairs side by side. One was old, worn smooth by years of use, marked by history and loss. The other was new, fresh cut and gleaming, full of possibility. "They look right together," Marcus said from the doorway. "They do," Asha agreed. She turned to face him. "Are you ready for this?" "I am. Are you?" "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure." Marcus crossed the workshop and wrapped his arms around her. "That sounds about right." They stood together in the familiar space, surrounded by the tools of Marcus's trade, breathing in the scent of wood and oil and home. Tomorrow, they would speak vows in front of the village. Tomorrow, they would begin their lives as husband and wife. But tonight, they were simply Marcus and Asha, two people who had found each other in the ruins of grief and built something beautiful together. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The village square was decorated with late summer flowers and ribbons. Benches had been set up for guests, and long tables waited to be filled with food. Asha dressed in Alina's house, her hands shaking as she fastened the buttons of her dress. "You look beautiful," Alina said, adjusting Asha's hair. "Catherine would have been so happy to see Marcus like this, so full of life again." "I hope I can live up to her legacy," Asha said quietly. "You already have." Alina kissed Asha's cheek. You saved him. That is all that matters. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. Marcus stood at the front of the assembly, dressed in his finest suit, his eyes bright with unshed tears. When Asha walked down the makeshift aisle, his face transformed with joy. The village elder spoke the traditional words, binding their lives together in the eyes of God and community. Marcus's voice was steady when he spoke his vows, promising to love and cherish Asha for all his days. Asha's voice trembled, but her words were no less sincere. I promise to honor your past while building our future, she said. I promise to stand beside you in joy and in sorrow. I promise to love you with everything I am. They exchanged rings. Marcus wore a simple gold band. Asha wore the wooden ring he had carved, its surface warm against her skin. When the elder pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Asha with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The feast afterward was joyous and loud. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Musicians played and people danced. Garrett made a toast that was both irreverent and touching, thanking Marcus for being the best damn foreman a crew could ask for and welcoming Asha as one of their own. Harold presented them with a beautifully carved mantel clock. Alina gave them a quilt she had sewn, each patch taken from fabric that had belonged to Catherine. So she can be with you both, Alina said, her eyes wet. A blessing, not a ghost. Asha held the quilt and felt the weight of acceptance, of family, of love that transcended death and difference. She looked across the crowd and found Marcus watching her, his expression full of wonder. The celebration continued long into the night, but eventually the guests began to drift away. The musicians packed up their instruments. The tables were cleared. Marcus and Asha walked home hand in hand under a sky full of stars. That was a good day, Marcus said. The best day, Asha agreed. Inside their house, Marcus lit the lamps while Asha hung Alina's quilt over the back of the couch. The two new chairs sat in the living area, waiting to be used. Marcus pulled Asha down to sit beside him, and she curled into his warmth. I used to think my life was over, Marcus said quietly, that I had used up all my chances at happiness. But then you walked into that barn and sat in an empty chair, and everything changed. I am glad I made that mistake, Asha said. It was not a mistake, it was fate. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop grieving and start living. Thank you for seeing me, Asha said, for looking past what I am and seeing who I am. They sat together in the lamplight, two people who had found each other through accident and kindness and a willingness to be vulnerable. Outside, the village slept. But inside, in the small house by the mill, a new chapter was beginning. The seasons turned. Autumn came again, painting the world in shades of amber and rust. Marcus and Asha settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together at the mill, ate meals side by side, fell asleep in each other's arms. The village, too, settled. The whispers faded. The stares became nods of greeting. Slowly, grudgingly, people accepted that the foreman and his orc wife were simply part of the community. Alina became a frequent visitor, bringing the children to play in the yard. Lily declared that Aunt Asha gave the best piggyback rides because she was strong. The boy, Thomas, named after his godfather, begged Asha to teach him how to carve stone. She promised she would when he was older. One afternoon in late September, Marcus came home from the mill with an odd expression on his face. There is a harvest supper next week, he said. The whole village is invited. It is a tradition, held in the same barn where we met. Asha understood immediately. Catherine's chair, she said. Yes, they are asking if we will come, both of us. Marcus set down his coat and crossed to where Asha stood. They want to formally acknowledge you as part of the community. Alina suggested it. That is kind of her. Will you come? I know it might be hard going back to that place. Asha thought about the empty chair, about the mortified girl who had stumbled into a celebration and found herself facing hostility and suspicion. That girl felt like someone from another life. She was a married woman now, respected and valued. She had earned her place. I will come, she said. Let us go together. The harvest supper was as grand as the wedding feast had been. The barn was warm and bright, packed with villagers who had come to celebrate another successful year. Long tables were piled with food. Children ran between the benches, shrieking with laughter. Musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. Marcus and Asha arrived together. Elinor met them at the door with a smile. I am glad you came, she said. She led them through the crowd to a table near the center of the barn. 2 chairs waited there, side by side. One was the chair Asha had mistakenly sat in a year ago. The other was the new chair Marcus had built, its twin. We saved these for you, Elinor said, because you both belong here. Asha felt tears prick her eyes. She looked at Marcus and saw him struggling with his own emotions. Catherine's chair was no longer empty. It was no longer a shrine to loss. It was simply a chair, waiting to be filled with life and warmth and the messy, beautiful future. They sat down together. Marcus took Asha's hand under the table and squeezed. Around them, the village celebrated. People came by to greet them, to welcome them, to share stories and laughter. Garrett told a joke that made Asha snort into her cup. Harold presented them with a basket of apples from his orchard. Children climbed onto their laps and demanded stories. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Late in the evening, when the dancing had started and the lamps were burning low, Marcus leaned over and whispered in Asha's ear. This is where it all started. 1 empty chair. And now 2 filled ones, Asha said. She kissed him softly. Thank you for asking me to stay. Thank you for saying yes. They stayed until the last song was played and the final guest departed. Then they walked home through the autumn night, their breath misting in the cool air. The mill was silent. The village slept. But in the small house by the creek, lights burned warm and welcoming. Inside, Marcus hung his coat and stoked the fire. Asha put water on to boil for tea. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of people who had learned each other's rhythms, who fit together like mortise and tenon. I have been thinking, Marcus said as they settled by the fire with their tea, about expanding the house, adding a room or 2. Why? Asha asked, though she thought she knew. Because I want children with you if you want them too. Marcus set down his cup and took her hands. I want to fill this house with noise and chaos and love. I want to build a family. Asha felt her heart swell. She had not dared to hope for this, had not let herself imagine a future that expansive. But looking into Marcus's eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and hope. I want that too, she said. More than anything. Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side. A man who had learned to honor the past while embracing the future. A man who had let go of guilt and chosen joy. They talked long into the night about the life they would build. About the children they would raise, teaching them to be kind and strong and open-hearted. About growing old together, their hands worn from work, their hearts full of shared memories. It was a good vision. A true one. When they finally climbed into bed, Asha lay in Marcus's arms and listened to his steady breathing. She thought about empty chairs and misunderstandings, and the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been a hungry traveler stumbling into a celebration. Now she was home, the fire crackled. The wind whispered at the windows. Marcus murmured her name in his sleep, his arms tightening around her. Asha closed her eyes and let herself sink into the warmth, into the safety, into the perfect rightness of belonging. Spring returned, and with it came change. Asha discovered she was pregnant in March, when the snow was just beginning to melt. She told Marcus on a Sunday morning, her hands shaking as she passed him the confirmation from the village healer. Marcus stared at the paper for a long moment. Then he looked up at Asha with tears streaming down his face. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice breaking. "We are," Asha confirmed. Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt his tears soaking into her hair, felt the way his whole body shook with emotion. This was a man who had thought he would never have children, who had buried that dream alongside his first wife. And now, impossibly, the dream was coming true. "I am terrified," Marcus admitted. "And so happy I could burst." "I feel exactly the same," Asha said. They told Alina first, of course. She screamed with joy and immediately began planning, talking about baby clothes and cradles and all the things they would need. The village received the news with genuine warmth. Even those who had been skeptical of the marriage seemed pleased. A baby was a symbol of hope, of continuity, of life moving forward. Marcus threw himself into preparations. He built a cradle from cherry wood, carved with animals and flowers. He expanded the house, adding a nursery with big windows that let in the morning sun. He read every book about childbirth and infant care that he could find, determined to be the best father possible. Asha worked at the mill until her belly grew too large to move safely around the machinery. Then she focused on preparing their home, sewing tiny clothes, stocking the pantry, making everything ready. Alina visited daily, sharing advice and stories from her own pregnancies. Summer stretched long and hot. Asha grew heavy and uncomfortable, but Marcus was endlessly patient. He rubbed her swollen feet, brought her cool drinks, told her stories to distract her from the aches. At night, he would rest his hand on her belly and talk to the child inside, telling it about the world it would soon enter. "We are going to love you so much," Marcus would murmur. "You are going to have the best mother, the best family. You are going to be so loved." Asha would cry hearing him, overwhelmed by the depth of his devotion. This man who had been so broken, who had carried so much pain, was now overflowing with hope and joy. She had helped heal him, but he had healed her too. Together, they had become something stronger than either could have been alone. The baby came in late August, on a morning when the sky was clear and the air smelled of harvest. The labor was long and difficult. Marcus stayed by Asha's side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when the healer suggested he might want to wait outside. "I am not going anywhere," Marcus said firmly. "We are in this together." When the baby finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and perfect, Marcus sobbed openly. The healer placed the infant in Asha's arms, and she stared down at the tiny face in wonder. The baby had Marcus's dark hair and Asha's green-tinged skin, a perfect blend of both parents. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a pair of small nubs that would eventually become tusks. "It is a boy," the healer announced. "A son," Marcus breathed. He reached out tentatively and touched the baby's hand. Tiny fingers curled around his thumb. "We have a son." They named him Milo, after Marcus's father, with the family name Lahi. Milo Lahi. The name felt right, solid, full of promise. The first weeks were exhausting and wonderful. Milo was a healthy baby with good lungs, and he used them frequently. Marcus and Asha took turns walking him through the night, soothing his cries, marveling at every small milestone. Alina brought meals and helped with laundry. The mill crew sent gifts, hand-carved toys, tiny boots, a miniature flannel shirt. Garrett stopped by one afternoon to meet the baby. He held Milo with surprising gentleness, his rough hands cradling the infant carefully. He is a good-looking boy, Garrett said. Got his mother's strength, I can tell already. And his father's stubborn streak, Asha added. God help you then, Garrett said with a laugh. He handed Milo back and clapped Marcus on the shoulder. You did good, boss. Real good. As summer faded into autumn, life settled into a new rhythm. Marcus returned to work at the mill, though he came home every day at lunch to see his son. Asha stayed home with Milo, learning the art of motherhood, discovering depths of love she had not known existed. Everything the baby did felt miraculous. His first smile, his first laugh, the way he would grab at her tusks and coo. One evening, as they sat by the fire with Milo asleep in his cradle between them, Marcus looked at Asha with an expression of pure contentment. I never thought I would have this again, he said quietly. A family, a home full of life. I thought that part of my life was over. It was never over, Asha said. It was just waiting for the right time to begin again. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, tying yourself to a man with so much baggage? Never. Asha reached over and took his hand. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Marcus Lahi. You and Milo both. Marcus raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. I love you, he said. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too. They sat in the firelight, watching their son sleep, listening to the crackle of the flames and the distant song of crickets. This was happiness, Asha thought. Not a grand, sweeping emotion, but something quieter and deeper. A sense of rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. The years unfolded gently. Milo grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved to follow his father around the mill and help his mother in the garden. Eleanor's children doted on their younger cousin, teaching him games and songs. The village embraced Milo completely. He was one of their own, a symbol of the community's ability to grow and change. When Milo was 3, Asha became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier. She knew what to expect, and her body remembered the rhythm. Marcus was just as devoted, just as attentive, but with less of the frantic worry that had marked Milo's arrival. Their daughter was born on a spring morning with wildflowers blooming outside the window. She came quickly, as if eager to join the world. When the healer placed her in Marcus's arms, he wept just as he had with Milo. Another miracle, he said, looking down at his daughter's face. She had Asha's eyes and a shock of dark hair. We are blessed. They named her Anna after Asha's mother, Anna Lathi. The baby was quieter than Milo had been, more observant. She would lie in her cradle and study the world with solemn green eyes, as if she were taking notes for later. Milo was fascinated by his little sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, telling her stories, showing her his toys, promising to teach her everything he knew. Watching them together, Asha felt her heart might overflow. This is what Catherine wanted for you, Eleanor said one afternoon, watching Marcus play with his children in the yard. A full, joyful life. She would be so proud. I hope so, Asha said. I think about her sometimes. About how generous she must have been to love Marcus so well that he could love again. Catherine was the best of us, Eleanor said softly. But so are you, Asha. You gave my sister's husband back his life. That is a gift beyond measure. The seasons turned. Milo started school, coming home each day with new words and ideas. Anna learned to walk, her chubby legs carrying her around the house at a determined toddle. Marcus and Asha grew older, their hair touched with gray, their bodies marked by years of work and love. The mill prospered. Marcus took on a partner, a young man named Daniel who was eager to learn the trade. It gave Marcus more time at home, more hours to spend with his family. He taught Milo woodworking in the evenings, the boy's small hands carefully shaping blocks of pine. He read stories to Anna, who had developed a voracious appetite for books. Asha took up stonework again, creating garden sculptures and decorative pieces that she sold at the village market. It felt good to work with stone again, to feel the familiar weight in her hands. She taught Milo the basics, showing him how to see the shape hidden inside the rock. Anna was more interested in plants, and she helped Asha maintain the large garden behind their house. One autumn evening, the year Milo turned 8 and Anna turned 5, the family gathered for dinner at the long table Marcus had built. It was a tradition now, everyone sitting down together at the end of the day to share food and conversation. Marcus sat at the head of the table, Asha at his right hand, the children flanking them. "Tell us a story, Papa," Anna demanded, her small face serious. "What kind of story?" Marcus asked. "A story about how you and Mama met," Milo said. He had heard the story a dozen times but never tired of it. Marcus glanced at Asha and she smiled. "Your mother came to a wedding feast," Marcus began. "She was tired and hungry and she saw an empty chair. She thought it was an invitation, so she sat down to eat." "But it was Aunt Catherine's chair," Anna said knowingly. "It was," Marcus confirmed. "And people were angry. But I looked at your mother and saw someone who had made an honest mistake, someone who deserved kindness." "And then you fell in love," Milo said, his voice dreamy. "And then we fell in love," Asha agreed. "Slowly, over time. We learned each other's stories and decided to write a new one together." "That is the best kind of story," Marcus said. He reached over and squeezed Asha's hand, "one with a happy ending." "This is not an ending," Asha corrected gently. "This is the middle, the best part." Marcus smiled. "You are right. This is the middle." After dinner, Marcus and Asha tucked the children into bed. They read stories, sang songs, kissed foreheads. Then they retired to their own room, to the bed they had shared for years, surrounded by the life they had built. "Do you remember the night I asked you to marry me?" Marcus asked, pulling Asha close. "Every detail," Asha said. "You gave me a wooden ring and promised to fill every empty chair. Have I kept that promise? You have exceeded it." Asha looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You have given me everything I never dared to dream of. A home, a family, a love that feels like bedrock." "You gave me the same," Marcus said. "You gave me a reason to stop living in the past, to build something new." They kissed long and slow with the comfort of years and the passion of newlyweds. When they finally settled into sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Asha felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life was not perfect. There were still hard days, still challenges to face. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Years passed in a blur of laughter and work and small moments of grace. Milo grew tall and strong, his orc heritage showing in his broad shoulders and the small tusks that emerged during his teenage years. He apprenticed at the mill, learning his father's trade, though he also showed a talent for stone carving. Anna became a fierce, bright girl who read everything she could find and asked questions that made the adults pause and think. She wanted to be a healer, she declared at age 10, and she spent every spare moment learning herbs and medicine from the village healer. Marcus and Asha grew older with grace. Their hair turned silver. Their hands became gnarled from decades of work. But their love remained constant, a steady fire that warmed everything around it. They still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses in the workshop, still sat together by the fire in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Alina aged 2, her children grown and married, her grandchildren filling her house with noise. She and Asha had become close friends, sisters bound not by blood but by choice. They worked together in the village, organizing festivals, helping new families settle in, creating the kind of community where everyone belonged. One harvest season, when Milo was 20 and preparing to take over the mill, and Anna was 17 and finishing her healing studies, the village held another great feast. It was a celebration of abundance, of another successful year, of the bonds that held them together. Marcus and Asha arrived at the barn arm in arm. Inside, the tables were laden with food and music filled the air. The chairs were all filled with laughing, talking people. Not a single one sat empty. "Remember the first time we came here?" Marcus asked, looking around the crowded space. "How could I forget? I was mortified. And I was enchanted." Marcus pulled Asha onto the dance floor as the musicians struck up a waltz. "I saw a woman who was brave and honest, and I knew I wanted to know her story." "And now you know all of it," Asha said, resting her head against his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "I know every chapter, and I love them all." They danced until they were breathless and laughing. Around them, the village celebrated. Their children danced with friends. Elena twirled with her grandchildren. Harold, now ancient and bent, tapped his foot to the music from his seat by the wall. This was home, Asha thought. Not a place but a people. A web of connections built over years, strengthened by shared joy and shared sorrow. She had come here as a stranger, sat down in an empty chair by mistake, and found everything she had ever needed. Late in the evening, as the celebration began to wind down, Asha and Marcus slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The autumn air was cool and crisp, and stars blazed overhead. "Thank you," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "For what?" Asha asked. "For sitting in that empty chair, for staying, for building this life with me." Marcus cupped her face in his scarred hands. "For loving me when I was too broken to love myself." "You were never broken," Asha said. "Just wounded, and wounds can heal." "They can," Marcus agreed, "with the right person beside you." They kissed under the stars, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way. A human and an orc, a grieving widower and a traveling stranger. Two lives that had intersected by accident and grown together by choice. Inside the barn, the music played on. The feast continued. Empty chairs were filled with people who loved each other, who had chosen to make a community together. And at the heart of it all were Marcus and Asha Lahi, proof that love could transcend difference, that grief could transform into joy, that the empty spaces in our lives could be filled with something beautiful if we had the courage to try. They walked home together through the starlit village, past the mill where they had worked side by side for so many years, to the house they had filled with laughter and children and decades of shared life. Inside, a fire still burned in the hearth. The chairs they had built together sat waiting, worn smooth by years of use. Marcus stoked the fire while Asha made tea. They settled into their chairs with the ease of long practice, their bodies fitting into the familiar curves. This was their ritual, their quiet ending to every day. Just the two of them, sitting together in the firelight. Content. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Asha said, reaching over to take his hand. Only that I did not meet you sooner." Marcus smiled. "But then again, maybe we met exactly when we were meant to. When we were both ready to take a chance on something unexpected." "On someone unexpected," Asha corrected. "On each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance, listening to the familiar sounds of their home settling around them. This was peace. This was love. This was the life they had built from one empty chair and a misunderstanding that had become the greatest gift either of them had ever received. Outside, the village slept. The mill stood silent, waiting for morning. The harvest feast was done, the decorations taken down, the tables cleared. But in the small house by the creek, in two worn chairs by a warm fire, Marcus and Asha Lahi held hands and counted their blessings. They had found each other against all odds. They had built a family despite the obstacles. They had created a life full of love and work and meaning. And every day, every single day, they chose each other again. That was the real magic. Not the dramatic first meeting or the wedding or the children, but the quiet, daily choice to stay, to love, to keep filling the chairs with warmth and presence and hope. The fire burned low. The tea grew cold. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. Marcus and Asha sat together, their hands clasped, their hearts full. They had come so far from that autumn evening when a stranger sat in an empty chair by mistake. Now, years later, there were no empty chairs left. Every seat was filled. Every space in their hearts was overflowing. This was their happy ending. But it was also their beginning, because love was not a destination but a journey, and theirs was far from over. There would be more seasons, more harvests, more quiet evenings by the fire. There would be grandchildren to spoil and gardens to tend and stories to tell. The road ahead was long and unknown, but they would walk it together, hand in hand, just as they had from the very first moment. Marcus had asked a hungry orc woman to sit down and finish her meal. One empty chair had become two filled ones, and those two chairs held a love that would last until the very end of their days.